We're here ahead of the Corporate Content Awards, and I'm joined by Neil Cowling, who is Head of New Business and Partnerships at Fresh Air. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
They're shortlisted for several categories tonight, including Best Use of Audio and Podcasts and Best Use of Long-Term Content. Could you just give us initially some insight into some of the work that you've entered tonight and that has been shortlisted?
Sure. So we specialize in fresh air production. We make podcasts for brands. So we help brands really tell their stories in the podcast world. Sometimes that is external work for an external B2C audience. Sometimes it's B2B, and sometimes it's internal for a company's own people. So an example is Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, who we make a weekly show talking about their own technology and the developments that they have going on, and that's presented by their in-house staff. And then we have a show like A Little Bit Richer for Legal & General, which is more external facing, presented by a brilliant young presenter called Iona Bain. And that is aimed at helping young people or people in their 20s and 30s set up a sound financial future. So it's quite, it's super well targeted towards an audience that a brand particularly wants to speak to, but couched in a creative format, or creating both video and audio that go across lots of different platforms.
And do you think the role of podcasting has changed much in the sort of corporate content space in recent years? And if so, in what way?
Yeah, it really has. I mean, we saw a lot of growth during COVID, and during COVID, there were a lot of corporations who were making video and then couldn't, and decided to make a podcast almost as a sort of hobby project. Where it is now is a much, much more central part of a corporation's content suite and communications work. So it's also, of course, video now as much as it is audio. So back 5 years ago, podcasts were really an audio product. Now they're video, which makes it more premium, makes it more repurposable across multiple types of platforms. So what we're seeing, thankfully, now is it taking a real central role, being a kind of content engine for an organization that can then go across social and newsletters and YouTube and Spotify and all those sorts of range of places that it can sit, which is a different world from where it was really just 3 years ago, really.
And when it comes to that sort of corporate content engine, do you think brands have become more adventurous in recent years in the sort of creative content that they're using and putting out there?
Yeah, they have. They have moved often beyond, it was certainly beyond this kind of Zoom calls that we saw during COVID, and then that moved into head-to-head conversations in a studio. And the core of what a podcast is still very much a long-form conversation between really well-informed people. So actually, two people in a room talking sometimes, very often, is the best execution. But we're seeing more and more people go on location, have interesting formats. They don't have to be super complicated, but adding little format elements that make it more than just one long form conversation. And as the podcasts tend to become more standard in their execution, those corporations and those brands who do something more adventurous stand out much more.
And is there sort of any part to podcasting that you think still remains a little bit misunderstood or a little bit opaque, and may even be putting off certain brands from getting involved in that space?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. Not that it's a complicated medium, but there are a lot of people who still don't really get it. So thankfully, 10 years ago, I would have had to explain to you what a podcast was. So I no longer have to do that, thankfully. But a lot of people consume podcasts without really understanding what they could do for a brand and how they fit into this corporate content suite. So they might be worried that it's difficult to measure, that it is difficult to bring an audience in, that it's a sort of a big labor-intensive weight on an organization. Our job is to help them understand that none of those things are true. They're very measurable now. They don't have to be a big labor-intensive piece of work. That's what we're here for, and as an agency. And actually, if you plan it right, if you get that format well judged, if you target the audience well, then it's a really powerful piece of well-targeted piece of work. But I think it takes someone within an organization often to have that spark that says, okay, let's try this at least, let's explore it. And what you actually get, as I said just now, is a content engine that's usually video for a fraction of the cost that creating a great big lavish corporate video would cost. And so that's our job, to help them navigate that. But it is true that it still feels like a bit of a black hole to lots of people. They hear podcasts, but they wouldn't understand how to make one. So going through that process can sometimes be a bit of a revelation. Actually, it's not as hard as I thought.
And because podcasts have become more popular now, I imagine it's a bit harder to do something that feels really original or really fresh.
Yeah.
Is there sort of a piece of work that you've been working on over the past year or so that you think feels really sort of ambitious or brave in this space?
Yeah, I think one of our most interesting clients in a way, or the client who has a lot of the most interesting stories to tell is Kew Gardens. So the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew. Their ambition with their work is to make us all understand that it's a centre of scientific brilliance, not just a nice place to go for a walk on a Sunday afternoon. So yeah, what we created with them last year, they're very lucky in that they have amazing ambassadors. So they have an ambassador in Kate Blanchett and a patron in His Majesty the King. And so unbelievably, last year we created a podcast episode of Kate in conversation with the King in the gardens of Windsor Castle, talking about the Millennium Seed Bank, which is this extraordinary place in Kew, where they host billions of seeds for the future should we need them. And the King is a patron, but he knows this topic intimately. Kate's really passionate about it. So creating something like that had two, obviously, you don't get much bigger celebrities than the two of them, but in conversation about something that they really care about, and that actually needs depth and needs context and needs to understand what it's all about, is the strength of podcasting. It would be very difficult to create something with that depth and detail as a written article that lots of people would read, or as or as a piece of social, because it takes plenty of time to get the message across. So Q, having got those moved absolute, moved heaven and earth to get those two people together, then created a piece of content that made massive PR impact, and frankly is just a great listen in itself.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much for giving some insight to your work, and best of luck at the awards
Thank you very
tonight.
much. Looking
Thank
forward
you.
to it.